Hello, I'm Malcolm Haslett. As we age, our teeth don't seem to last as long as other body parts. Where would we be without teeth? There are so many new advances in dentistry and, for that matter, many new body parts. How do you keep a record, and who keeps the record of what goes into our body? We'll find out more next on OurTime. And welcome to our program, where our special guest is Steve Soukoulis, who is, I don't know how to describe you. Actually, I don't know that we even should show your face. Because you remember that commercial where the dentist had to turn around?
I'm old enough to remember that.
But you're not an average dentist. You're a periodontist?
That's correct.
Just explain what the difference is, if you could.
Dentistry has its general dentistry core group of procedures that general dentists do. And then sometimes there are some procedures that need to be done by or carried out by specialists, which are more specialised and individualised for patients. Right. But that there's a blurring of those lines nowadays. A lot of knowledge is out there with development of technology. A lot of training facilities and education programs are there for general dentists to upskill and do some of the stuff that I do. So, who knows, in another 20, 30 years, there may be no specialists left, and, we're all...
Star Trek time, maybe.
Maybe, I don't know, maybe you go into the holodeck and you get sorted out. I don't know.
Yes. I don't know. Yes. Mind you, your equipment, you feel a bit like you're on the holodeck, particularly all your X-ray machines and things.
It's important.
I'm talking to Steve as if I know him, because I do, because he's actually done some implants for me. Fortunately, because I don't want to have false teeth that fall out when I laugh, which I've seen happen too often.
That's a problem. Well, that's the whole reason dental implants came about, because dentures were not stable and patients needed some other device to assist them in chewing and functioning and eating. And
well, in truth, how stable are our teeth with age?
Well, look, there's wear and tear for sure. And so it depends on your genetics and your environmental factors of whether or not you're going to end up having some of your teeth or all your teeth later on in life. There are some things you can do that are not so good. So smoking is not great for your mouth. And then having some diseases, some systemic stuff like diabetes and osteoporosis and a whole bunch of other conditions.
And bad teeth can basically show those things.
Well, sometimes we diagnose patients from their mouth. And so, the mouth is connected to your kneecap somehow. And so we sometimes get patients coming in and we have a look and say, well, this doesn't look exactly what I normally see. This is out of the box. And sometimes we'll refer a patient to their GP and ask them to run some tests. And sometimes we diagnose patients with a variety of different medical conditions.
But the other thing is now you can basically see everything inside the mouth, which, of course, you had to do with your eyes before rather than...
The imaging technology is so incredible. And even the stuff that I have at work probably pales in comparison now to some of the stuff I saw prior to COVID, when we could travel and go to conferences and so on. It's unbelievable. The quality is incredible. And the doses of radiation to produce some of these images is really low and really high quality. So
yes, it's always a worry when the dentist or the technician taking the X-rays has to leave the room and think, hang on, I'm still here, holding on.
I have a very good answer, because a lot of my patients ask me that, but it's basically, if you were to do this 10 times a day, you'd also leave the room as well. So if you do it once every 5 or 10 years, it's okay.
I can understand.
It's safe to do so.
So the thing is, with modern dentistry and putting things into the body that weren't originally there, we've talked about this at the beginning of the app that you worked with other people to develop. That basically, wherever you went in the world, if something went wrong with whatever was there, they would know.
They would gain access to your information.
Yes.
So funny you say that. We have actually, we're pretty close to internationalising the application. So we've had some calls and we get contacted by people overseas saying, how do I get my information onto the web application, the website, so they can access? So people from Singapore and Hong Kong and so on, and these high traffic areas, Dubai, contact us every other day saying, hey, I want my information on there. So we've sort of pushed us to allow patients to get their information put on there. Now, in terms of the application and the entering of the data, has to be done by a dental professional or someone that's trained, a technician.
Yes.
Because we want to make sure it's accurate information, but a patient can certainly request that their information is put on the site.
But if you don't have that information, it's like putting the wrong part in a car engine, for example.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Because there are the pieces or the screws,
components, we can call them components.
The components, thank you, that's the word. Because components can come from different places, you really need sort of the original bits and pieces to go together?
Well, the way that it works in most countries is that the dental implant is highly regulated. So whichever the regulatory body of that country controls the supply of dental implants, that implant goes through multiple checks to make sure it's safe for patients to use.
Right.
And
I suppose that's the same with the drugs.
Correct.
And for example, the COVID vaccination.
Vaccination, so on, correct.
Everybody's been checking.
Making sure that
when people say it's all happened too fast,
it
hasn't really, because there's been so many people checking.
Checking, correct. So there's a huge engine that does that on behalf of the Australian people, which is great. And so they are the regulatory bodies, and the regulatory bodies talk to each other. So Australia talks to America, talks to Europe, and so on, and Asia. And so part of that learning process is that then we tend to adopt really good quality regulations that increase patient safety.
Comfort of having the
procedure, being comfortable, excellent, or being confident. The installation of the procedure, yeah. That's a nice way to say it.
I'm thinking it's an art installation, but when you look at what you end up with,
it's a medical device installation, absolutely.
Yes,
yeah.
quite amazing.
So that one bit that we were talking about before is the screw that sits in the jawbone. So that's really important, highly regulated, very safe to use. What's happened in the past is that you can swap out the bits that connect the crown or a bridge or a denture to the implants, and that's called an abutment. And they sometimes get substituted for third-party componentry. Now, typically, there's nothing wrong with that, but some evidence, and there's some new evidence that we've received from, that's been published in the last couple of years, that say some components are not as good as original components. And so if you think about your car, if you go to your mechanic and, you've got a problem with your air filter or your carburetor or whatever new things that are under the bonnet nowadays, I don't know what they are. You can speak to Mr. Tesla.
Just open your mouth, you can say everything. But,
exactly. You'd want to think that maybe that they're using high quality parts and so on. So some of those non-general parts are high quality parts, but it's nice to know as a patient, what am I receiving?
You've got the best.
And that's what the registry is about, is we're trying to promote a conversation between the patient and the dentist to say, hey, I'm going to use this for you, Malcolm. Are you happy for me to utilise this? Some patients may say, look, that's really expensive. Can you do something different? And you say, okay, well, I can move over to these parts. They may not perform as well, but they certainly decrease the cost. Are you happy with that? Unfortunately, what was happening in the past is that conversation wasn't happening with patients.
Right.
And you were unaware.
It's one life, though, isn't it,
Yeah,
Steve?
correct.
That's the reality. We've got some vision here that's worth having a look at. A lot of reading to do. We'll be chatting while we're having a look at this. Where has this come from and why is it? It's on YouTube, so people can look at it slowly at home.
This is a video that we've created.
What is DIR?
Well, it's the Dental Implant Registry.
And these are some of those were some of the implants that can be used.
Well, yeah, we read through a few things where you see the variety of different implant systems, and there are multiple around the world, and the growth of implant dentistry is, phenomenal and exponential. So understanding what part you've had is really important in maintaining the implant in the long run. So what the registry does is it registers the three components, the crown, the abutment, and the implant. And then when you go off and you're all finished, but sometimes you might need another dentist to work on your implant, but they don't know what components there are that have been used. So the registry helps communication between the dentist to dentist and the dentist to patient, and then also improves transparency. So for example, that conversation, what are you using in me, Steve? Well, Malcolm, I'm using this, this, and this. So that's sort of what the registry does in a nutshell. We're improving communication for patients and dentists, and we're improving communication between dentists and dentists.
And taking the mystique out of it at the same time.
Correct. Look, we really think that before I started this, I was definitely of the thought that only genuine componentry should be used. But over time, I've been educated from a variety of different laboratories that make their own componentry and so on, and companies that they do an amazing job, and the quality is so high. And that's where the regulators have changed the regulations in the last, actually 12 months, to support the production of these devices, but allowing for the safety to be high. So you can't go and buy a component off of eBay like you used to and bring it overseas, over to Australia. But you can bring things overseas, but as long as you go through a process. Right. And that's what the Australian
I
TGAs
can just imagine turning up to any dentist saying, look, I've got the screwy bit and I've got the bit that goes on and the screw that holds it all together. Can you put this in for me, please?
No,
it's not quite like that.
No, not like that.
Steve, just talking about you and where you came or where you came from to come to this. So as a young man, you obviously decided you went to uni, and did you study medicine first and specialise in dentistry, or?
Oh, some specialties do. So if you're an oromaxillofacial surgeon, that's what the guys do. They sometimes do dentistry, then medicine, or medicine, then dentistry. Right. In my field, you don't have to go off to do medicine, but you have to obviously do a specialty, and then prior to that, there's a residency. So I ended up going off and doing a residency. Wasn't sure what I was going to do exactly, but knew something surgical was sort of something on the cards for me. And I met a couple of people that sort of inspired and mentored me, and then here I am.
Isn't that very important in life?
Absolutely. Mentorship's so important. Yeah.
We'll talk in a minute just about the differences between a dentist that you go to check out your fillings and somebody like Steve. So join us after this short break. Our guest is Steve Soukoulis, periodontist to the stars. That's me, because he's fixed my teeth. Steve, in all seriousness, when people when they have a problem with their mouth and they go to their local dentist, I guess they don't really know what the procedures are. What can you do for me? What happens next? When do my teeth need to go? What do we do for advice with that?
I think that the basics are, if you can keep a tooth, then you should. And some of the things that, some of the reasons why you keep a tooth would be that there's still healthy gum, healthy bone around the tooth. The root of the tooth is nice and solid, and you still have some tooth structure left. So you can work with that. You can polish and trim that and then put a crown on. That's great. Right. And I used to say to patients, look, if you were to design a tooth made by Mother Nature to re-implant it, it'd be like $500 million in a Japanese lab somewhere. So nothing's better than Mother Nature. However, when you lose those parts of that equation that I just mentioned, that's when you need to start considering, I probably need a replacement.
Well, in my particular case, the tooth literally split right in half.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's irretrievable.
A piece of bread, but I'm sure something had happened long before that.
I hope it was worth that. No, crusty bread. But that's true. So sometimes it's irretrievable. And then what you asked me before during the break was that, like, when do you jump on something like that? And sooner the better, because you can preserve the gum and the bone to allow for you to decide on what you want to, what option do you want to use when you're replacing your tooth. So one option is that you can have a denture. If you're missing a tooth, you can have a denture. You can also have a gap. If you don't want to replace it, you can have a gap.
Yes, but you whistle when you talk.
Correct.
It's a gap.
So you can have a denture, you can have a bridge. So the dentist will cut the teeth either side and then put some caps on, and there's a little dummy tooth between. Or you can have what we've had is a dental implant. So those 4 options are available and should be discussed with your dentist. But getting onto it earlier if you do have a fracture or there's not enough tooth structure or there's an infection is really ideal.
Well, these are some of the things that, of course, COVID has caused a problem for, because with all the restrictions with surgery and so on, I had to wait for nearly a year before I could get the whole thing together.
Look, we've noticed that the level of disease, of oral diseases in our patients have increased. So where we had a patient that was really nice and stable in terms of gum disease, they've come back with lots more inflammation, bleeding and so on. And patients such as yourself that had to wait for so long to get their teeth out and their implants and so on, we're seeing more bone loss, more gum recession and so on.
So in this case, you actually did a bit of a bone graft with me.
Yep.
So do I ask you the question? Bit of bovine bone?
Yes. So that's.
I've been mooing a lot
lately. It is a good question. I was actually speaking to a rep today, and she said that not a lot of dentists talk to patients about bone grafts. And so that's one important thing with the registry. We register your bone grafts, and we've updated their application for more details. So when you go to the blood bank, for example, and you donate blood, it's very important for some people to donate blood on a regular basis. If you don't have that conversation with the patient and they go to the blood bank and they find out, I can never donate ever again, that can be life-changing for some patients. Quite upsetting. So we always discuss with patients, this is what we potentially could use. Is there something on the list that you don't want me to use at all? That might be religious, it might be ethical, it might be a whole bunch of different reasons,
Sure.
it might be vegetarians and so on. So it's important to have the conversation with the patient prior to, and then registering those components on the registry. We've even got the blood bank asking for DIR registrations when patients go, like, do you have a registration? And they can look up the bone graft material that was used.
Well, when I had a bit of a messy problem with another tooth that had splintered and basically fallen apart, you needed to take a little bit of my blood to mix with.
Correct, yeah. And so the newer procedures allow us to, it's sort of like, personalised medicine, where you're taking some of your own blood, your own cells, your own growth factors, and you're putting it back in the graft, and you heal. There's nothing like you to you.
Yes,
as I'm saying, we're trying to preserve the teeth as much as we can, but if it's that time's over, it's over. But when we're doing bone grafts, we like to use a little bit of your own bone or some of your blood, which promotes positive healing in the graft, and then you get really nice results.
Mine's done very well. I'm very happy. But you've been really researching what people need to know or want to know as well. We've just got a little diagram here that makes it all make perfect sense in actual fact. And here it is.
Yeah, we've also, through the registry, developed a patient advocacy group. So we want to know what patients think prior to, during and after their procedures. So we have a little bit more understanding as dentists of what they need. And this actually comes from patients. Patients have actually developed this little form that we post out to or email out to patients when they contact the registry when they're querying about dental implants. And so you can see number one is using high quality parts, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Getting good outcomes relates to that. Registering your components in the registry is really important. Obviously, we spoke about that. Certification of training. So we spoke about general dentists and specialists. Just because you're a general dentist doesn't mean that you can't place dental implants, and the registry runs education courses to improve the skill sets of people when they're wanting to do implants, so that eventually patients get good outcomes, and that's what we're focused on. But you can ask your dentist, hey, have you done this before? That's a pretty simple question. It's not a bad question to ask before you get started.
Not a bad question to ask.
In Australia, this is probably not so much in Australia, but if you're going overseas to have treatment done, what are your basic infection control practices?
Yes, we'll talk about that in a minute, because that is, people are saying, let's go overseas and get a cheap job done.
Sure.
But the infection control is interesting too, because in the cases that I've seen you with this, there's always been a plan.
Absolutely. So, we know a variety of different procedures that need to be done, and they need to be done in a sterile environment, and we need to use kosher componentry and materials and so on to get good outcomes.
But it's the aftercare
as well, absolutely.
Which is the long-term maintenance
stuff.
Not just with some mouthwashes or whatever. It's to make sure that you've gone back and things are being checked again.
When patients leave, we say, look, treat this like a tooth. So you would clean it the same way you floss it, you brush it, and you would have someone clean it professionally, the gentle brush, so that you would have someone professionally clean it. And so it's part of your mouth. And implants can develop problems. So that's another aspect of the registry, is that we're trying to track those problems and see who's who early on to circumvent, jump in earlier than waiting for a massive problem to occur.
Right.
And so,
And I suppose the word surgery frightens people too.
Correct.
But it's microscopic stuff you're really dealing with.
Not so microscopic, but certainly smaller stuff. I think people think about open heart surgery. That's pretty scary stuff. But here, we've got a diagram of, so this is one of the latest articles in a dental journal, and they're looking at the comparison between the way that third-party components fit with versus genuine components.
Right.
And so there are differences in the fit. That's technical
so
to
the
explain.
first one on the left-hand side of the screen
is the good bit.
Yep.
Is the genuine component, and then the other two components are the variations in design. Now, they may work extremely well in a patient, but sometimes they may not. But the next slide will show you that in some instances with heavy load and patients that grind their teeth and so on, these components have a greater chance of breaking. So you can see where they've snapped. Now, sometimes the screw that locks the crown in breaks. That's not a problem. You can take it out.
The crown is the tooth.
The tooth, correct. And so that little middle bit can be removed. Sometimes it's finicky to do that, but it can be removed and replaced. But sometimes these other components can lead to fractures of the implant, and that's it. You need to start again. So again, understanding what components you've had is super important. Make sure they're high quality is super important.
Right. What made you interested in this part of dentistry?
Again, it was one of my mentors. So when I went through and I was doing my residency, we were receiving referrals for problems with dental implants in the periodontist department. And then I was saying, well, why is it like that? And then I'd ask questions and some people say, had an answer or they didn't. And that spiked my interest. And I said, right, this is really interesting.
Did you come from a dental type family? No.
Not at all. My family's quite a humble background beginning. They were sort of farmers in Greece.
Oh, really?
And mum was more so tourism and building and so on. And but not a medical person in the group or dental person in the group.
Amazing.
Yep.
Well, the thing is, as you said before, everything has changed and is constantly changing to such a degree. How do you keep up?
Oh, look, education's a key, and I'm associated with a few dental forums, so on a few variety of social media, and so I'll go back and we have closed groups of where we post, even specialist experts post stuff to the group, and we get a whole bunch of specialists across the world that come through and say, hey, I would have done it this way, or I would do it that way. So that's the one way. And then obviously I'm always learning, so I'm always looking at education bodies to help assist me with some of the latest technology. The technology is running away, so it's really important to stay afloat and stay in tune with what's happening out there.
A friend of mine has a 3D printer. Mm-hmm. Is 3D printing ever going to become part of teeth?
It is today.
Already?
So already. So some of the surgical guides that we use to help us drill in, so we have complex case on Saturday. I worked the whole Saturday morning and afternoon, and I had a couple of cases where there were complicated reconstructions of the jaws. Oh, right. And we use these little 3D printed guides to help us drill and place the implants in perfect positions. So digital technology, 3D printing is well and truly underway in dentistry.
But that's learning even more, isn't it? That's not just about the human body. That's learning how those
technology
things work.
Yeah, exactly. And the issue that we have now is we don't want to run too far forward with technologies that we haven't assessed. Yes, so it's important to stay within your lane and ensure that you're doing procedures that have good track record, or at least early evidence say, hey, this works really well.
Yeah. We'll be back with a lot more in just a moment. Our guest has been Steve Soukoulis. Steve, you're a periodontist. What does peri mean?
Around. It's a Greek word.
Oh, is it?
Surrounding or...
How convenient.
How convenient.
Did you speak Greek before because you're from a Greek family?
Yeah, absolutely. My dad was a stickler for us speaking fluent Greek. So,
oh, really?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've forgotten probably 20% of what he taught me, but still can converse with mum and relatives and so on.
Well, you've just made me think. The language of dentistry, what language is it?
It's a mixture, but certainly Latin and Greek are within medicine. Latin and Greek are quite prominent. So when I was going through biology at high school, I could recognise some of the words, so it made it a little bit easier when I was studying. So that was a benefit.
So how long have you studied? And if the answer isn't most of my life,
you never stop learning. But look, formal training started in '91. I graduated basic dental degree in '96. Did my residency for a couple of years and also did some examinations during that time, and then went off and did my specialty. And then, since then I've been involved in education from day dot. So 20 plus years.
Oh, don't try. I'm trying to pretend. So just very quickly, if someone is interested in all forms of dentistry, where do they go? How do they start?
Oh, look, I think one good start is looking at the local dental school and going speaking to someone there. So going to your local university, and if they run a dental program, that's a good start. And then from there, a local dentist or someone in the family that's a dentist.
Yeah, talk to the local dentist.
Talk to the local dentist, yeah, absolutely.
We always say talk to your local GP. Yep. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
I hope that's been of interest to you. I hope you've learned a little bit more about dentistry and implants in particular.
Thank you, Mel.
And I'm really happy with mine. So if you've got a hole there, maybe go talk to your dentist first of all as a starting point. So until next time on OurTime, keep your teeth nice till then. See you.